Good evening, Internet. This is Lord Malachite returning to you again for some more little reviews of animation and other things going on in the animation world. I just wanted to start off with Blossom here and give a shout out to the real Powerpuff Girls, the ones that ended back in the early 2000s and that we all loved and have now been replaced by. I really don't need to need to do a video going into how terrible the Powerpuff Girls reboot is. I mean, if you don't know that by now, then what's the point? But she's going to be my little mascot. But setting her aside for now, I've put on my Steven Universe shirt because it's Steven Universe time, or at least it will be momentarily. Just a few things we want to go over before I get into some Steven Universe stuff. Firstly, the state of this room. Yes, it looks like an absolute disaster. There are boxes and random things all over the place. My kitchen is being remodeled currently, and most of my kitchen is now here in the computer room. So that's why it looks so terrible in here. It desperately needs a woman's touch. Actually, I just need a kitchen, and then some strong arms to help move some stuff out of here and turn this back into a room again. But until that point in time, this is what I'm stuck with. So I did mean to mention that in my first video about the second season of Star, and it just didn't get out there. So yes, that's why things look so low budget right now. That's just the way it is, unfortunately. Also, I realized that in my second video of Star, I did not manage to talk about Ludo in the Wild other than to offhandedly say I wanted to set it aside and mention it was the only thing season 2 had done right at that point. And I will talk about that episode for a moment here before getting into Steven Universe. Ludo in the Wild is a fantastic episode of Star Versus because it took so many risks. Ludo has always been kind of a fun character. He's fun to watch, but mainly he's just the odious comic relief in the series. He's there for different characters to make fun of. He's basically meant to be this kind of totally inept villain, and here we just see him thrust into this situation where he's totally alone. He's lost his castle. He's lost his chance to get Star's wand forever because it's been destroyed, and obviously he doesn't know about Star's new wand yet at this point in time. So he's just kind of journeying through space all wherever Star chucked him through the portals he opened with the dimensional scissors, and he's a man who's basically lost everything. No castles, no friends, no monsters. He doesn't even have the wand to lust after anymore. And he's thrust into these situations and he just finds a way to survive. The episode is very, very minimalist, mainly just focusing on these little things with Ludo, how he ends up in the lair of the giant spider, how he's in the freezing cold, and how he just manages to overcome and outsmart and basically become the master of this new domain he's in, not even realizing, in fact, that he's still on Muni until the very end of the episode. And we do see him claim at the end of the episode a very primitive looking wand type thing that appears to be made with the missing piece of Star's wand. I'm sure there'll be more on that coming, but that's what we have so far. I don't really feel like I have a lot to say about the episode because it was just so good. They took a character who really didn't bring anything to the table but comic relief, certainly not a character that I thought that I would want to watch an entire episode about, and they really made it fun. And the best thing is there's almost no dialogue in the episode. Very little, grunts and mannerisms from Ludo, and we hear him whine and complain a couple times about things, but that's about it. It's mainly just watching Ludo like a nature film, hence probably why it was called Ludo in the Wild. It very much does boil down to that in the end. And I really thought that that was brilliant. We need more episodes like that that really explore who these characters are. So that was a great thing, and that is why I didn't really talk about it in my season 2 rant, because I was basically tearing down the first 2 episodes, full length episodes of the season. And that was the one thing I felt they did right, and I'm not going to throw that under the bus or put it in the same bracket as the other ones. I tend to watch my animation on the weekends, so admittedly, even though it's Thursday night, I still haven't gotten around to this past Monday's Star episodes, but I intend to on Saturday night, and I intend to be putting together a video to that. I'll also be putting together a video for the season 6 of My Little Pony. I'll focus mainly on the new episode that'll be on this weekend. So I'll be recording that probably on Sunday night, and I will also talk a bit about what I think of season 6 so far. I'm not really going to get into the episodes from all the other seasons. Everybody's already done that. There's plenty of people doing My Little Pony. So, but I do want to put in some of my own thoughts when I see the episode this weekend. So you can look for that as well. Tonight I'm going to talk about Steven Universe, and admittedly, because of the way I watch animation, I am kind of behind. In fact, I've only seen most of week 1 of the Summer of Steven, and I actually didn't even get to see the last episode of that because it wasn't available at the time that we normally watch these, because I have several people that I watch them with all at once, and we kind of have a little online get together. It's like a little party, and we watch all the cool things going on at once when all of us have the time to. So that's the way it's done, and that's why my videos will always be a little bit behind. So I appreciate people that look for my insight on things. I will be a little bit later than most people. You won't be getting a YouTube video within a half hour of the episode's airing, but that's just the way I am. But I do intend to continue doing these. So next week, when I do a Steven Universe video, I will focus on week 2. This week's video, the one I'm doing right now, I'm really just going to be talking about the first 4 episodes in the Summer of Season, which would be Drop Beat Dad, Mr. Greg, the name is forgetting, is not coming to me right now, but I forgot it, and then the new Lars. So we're going to focus on those 4 because all of them brought something new and exciting to the table, and I deeply apologize for forgetting that episode's name. So starting the week out, we had Drop Beat Dad, where Marty comes back, and Marty hasn't been seen since Story for Steven, and this is kind of interesting because we see his character really hasn't changed in all the years. It's clear that when Greg was on tour as Mr. Universe and he decided to stay in Beach City, we can tell it's basically the 80s at that point in time, based on the dress and the type of music that Greg was playing. So, given when the actual Steven Universe series is taking place, it's been a good 30 years or so for Greg since he's probably seen Marty. Now we do get the tidbits to put together, since Marty is Sour Cream's biological father, and it's mentioned way back in Onion Friend from season 2 that Vidalia, she used to hang out with Amethyst, and she also was hanging out with Greg, and then at some point in time Greg kind of faded away from that, and Vidalia and Amethyst just continued hanging out together. Based on that time frame, that would really make sense if Vidalia was seeing Marty at that point in time. That obviously would have been really awkward for Greg. So it's kind of understandable why Greg may have pulled back from that friendship and just let Vidalia and Amethyst do what they wanted to do, while Greg kind of focused on being with Rose, who he was trying to get this real relationship going with, especially as was shown later in We Need to Talk, where we have the big moments between Greg and Rose and how their relationship is going to go. So this, to me, was a really interesting episode because we got to see Sour Cream show some real character. He's been in episodes before, but usually he's just a background character. He's the DJ. I could rave to this is his catchphrase. So, and that's cool about him. He's just the typical cool kind of slacker guy. Doesn't really care about much. He's got his own thing going on, and as long as he has his music, he's happy. We've known that about him the entire series since his character was introduced, and we didn't really learn so much more about Sour Cream in this episode, so much as we saw him kind of evolve into the person he's really going to be. He's not afraid to stand up to his biological father, ruining what his whole deal is and what he's trying to accomplish with his DJing. He doesn't want to be corporatized. He doesn't want to be representing lame products. He wants his music to be what it is, and he's perfectly willing to do it on his own, much like Greg was back in the day. I mean, he had Marty, who was a bad manager, but Greg was always willing to basically go it alone, and he didn't mind walking away from a potential career that he would have had back then. Sour Cream, it's not so much that he's looking to walk away, but he's willing to do it his way, and he's not going to compromise his own integrity just to get some audience of people or get some better equipment. It's just not what he's going to do. So that was a really neat thing to see about this character who's kind of been more or less a blank slate up until now. And we also got to see that Yellowtail and Sour Cream, it's we've seen them argue before in the past, and we see them argue early in this episode. But we really see that even though Yellowtail is Sour Cream's stepfather, not his actual father, he really does care about this boy who's quickly becoming a man, and he is able to let go of his own prejudices and his own beliefs about what kind of guy the sour cream should be and help his stepson live out his own dreams. He doesn't want to be a fisherman like his stepfather, and this is what he wants to do. He wants to DJ. Some great jokes in there about how many Germans make a living doing DJing. A little stereotypical, but a nice jab at the electronica music scene. And I really found the way that sour cream ultimately handles things is pretty cool. The other thing I really liked is that we see Steven's strength in this episode, his physical strength, which hasn't really been on display much before. And here he's able to lift heavy things all on his own, and it doesn't really look like he's using gem powers. Now, we know this strength would obviously be a result of the gem DNA that he has. Whether he's actually manifesting a power here or whether it's just a thing he can naturally do without having to think about it, is kind of in question, but I would lean toward it's something he can just naturally do because he doesn't seem to struggle with it. Whenever Steven discovers a new power, it's usually something that he ends up really struggling with and it takes him time to master. If this is something he's just able to do, then that's going to open up some new doors in the future and also show that he might begin to grow more. We know the fact that he might have this perpetually kind of childlike body with the aging thing has been a question before. Obviously, there's never been a human gem hybrid, but it looks like Steven is starting to come into his own, and his body's beginning to mature, not just as a gems, but also as a human being. So obviously there's still plenty more things to come with Steven. This was just a minor thing, but it was an interesting one, and I think it's definitely headed in the right direction. At the end of this episode, of course, after Marty screws everything up, he basically says he never wanted to come here to begin with. He just was there to give Greg this check that he has to give him. And apparently, we learn at the end of that episode, and then at the beginning of the next one, Mr. Greg, that after all these years, Marty sold one of Greg's original songs and managed to sell it to a fast food company using it as a burger jingle, Pepe's Burgers, if I recall. This was really fun because we see that after all this time, something's really happened with Greg's music. Greg never really stopped making music. I mean, he stopped really performing in the traditional sense, and he wasn't cutting albums, but throughout the series, we frequently see him expressing his emotions by just coming up with a little song on the fly, whether he's just hanging out with his son or feeling bad like he let the crystal gems down, or he just sees something that truly inspires him. Music is a big part of who he is, and even though he long ago stopped trying to make it as some kind of professional musician, it's always going to be a major part of his character. And that pretty much displays a big part of this episode. Mr. Greg is a musical, and it has these wonderful, wonderful dramedy moments. I mean, there's some real, just cute little scenes we have, the way the music is performed, the song and dance numbers between Greg and Steven and the hotel staff, and then later as Pearl is drawn into their song and dance, and she actually begins to have something of a good time up in Empire City. Empire City. We get hit suddenly with the drama, this tension that is always there between Pearl and Greg. How they've never really been able to talk about what happened with Rose 30 years ago, and we have this beautiful moment where Pearl sings the song "Isn't It Over" on the balcony of the room that they're staying in, and while Marty and Stephen are sleeping, she's out on the balcony, basically lamenting everything that happened. And it's interesting because we've always known that Pearl has just never really liked Greg. She's tolerated him at best because she's Steven's father. She always kind of saw him as an interloper. She really doesn't want him to be all that involved in Steven's life because he has all this big, bright future ahead of him. And even by human standards, Greg is something of a loser. Now, to be clear, she does not hate Greg. She certainly would, you'd think, would have a right to, given the fact that he essentially stole Rose from her all those years ago. But she doesn't. She doesn't like Greg, but she doesn't really hate him so much either. I think it's more that he flusters her a lot because she just doesn't understand what it is that Rose saw in this silly Earthman who, did songs and dances. It never really amounted to anything. He wasn't impressive by human standards, and by gem standards he would be an insect. But yet Rose saw something so worthwhile in him that she wanted to spend her time with him. He was not just a passing fancy. This was a man that she really wanted to be with and eventually have a child with, even though it cost her physical form. And that's really something that obviously Pearl is still just not able to understand even after all this time. She might logically accept what happens, but she'll never really be able to understand why. And you could say it's kind of a combination of Stephen and his own mother, who basically finally forces this issue. Pearl and Greg never really got along. They kind of fought over Rose, and they were constantly trying to one up each other in different ways while they fought for her attention. And ultimately, Greg won and Pearl lost. And it's long past time for them to kind of get past this and bury the hatchet, but they've never been able to. There's definitely stubbornness and pride on Pearl's part, and Pearl's my favorite character, and I don't have any problem with saying she's a very flawed character. She has a lot of issues that she hasn't dealt with. The results of this episode being hopefully that she will now be able to begin to deal with some of those. But we also see from Greg's standpoint that he never really reached out to her either. And part of everything that's going on, I would say, is that and Stephen has to point this out in his own song at the end. They need to talk to each other. In fact, Pearl and Greg are probably the only two people who can really truly understand what the other is going through. They've both lost Rose now. Pearl lost Rose to Greg. Rose essentially chose Greg over Pearl as the person that she truly wanted to be with from a romantic standpoint. And of course, Greg later went on to lose her, not to another person or gem, but because they had the child together. Rose lost her physical form, and now she's a part of Stephen. So he hasn't seen the woman he loves, and ever since Stephen was born, and that had to be very difficult for him. So they both are truly capable of understanding the loss that the other feels, but they don't really talk to each other. And now, after all this time, they finally get things out in the open. And I love the fact that Pearl is able to admit that, in spite of everything, she doesn't hate Greg. She does kind of get into how she doesn't understand how things went, but it's time for things to go on. We still don't know very much about Pearl's character in the grand scheme of things. I mean, we know she was essentially the first crystal gem, aside from Rose herself. We know that she's considered defective by Homeworld. We know that Pearl basically worships Rose and dedicates everything she does to the woman, including raising her son. What we don't know about Pearl is essentially where she came from. Was Pearl, Rose Quartz was basically an important gem before the whole rebellion thing over Earth. Did Rose essentially own Pearl? Like, was Pearl the Pearl assigned to Rose, and Rose kind of brought her out of just being a servant and into a more fully realized three-dimensional role? Or is Pearl someone that Rose found maybe on Earth, a defective gem cast out, and Rose found her? We did learn about Amethyst Origin in season 1, and we definitely learned about how Garnet was first formed and how Ruby Ruby and Sapphire kind of accidentally fell into this relationship, and then they were thrust by circumstances into depending on each other, and it really developed into this deep, deep affection for each other. So that was a really nice thing that we saw earlier in season 2, or yeah, season. So by seeing these things, we're getting to know more about the characters. We have more knowledge about Lapis's origins, and Peridot lets little things slip here and there, but we still don't know all that much about Pearl. Mainly, what we learn about Pearl when it comes to her past usually relates directly to Rose rather than about herself. So I do hope at some point we're going to learn more about her, but I can certainly wait. Moving on, now we have the episode with the shorties, and this was a lot of fun. I mean, everybody loves a good Peridot episode, and I think it was really cool the way that they mix Amethyst and Steven into this, and because the three of them just kind of hanging out like best buds. Amethyst has always been like the slacker older sister, and she and Steven usually have a good tandem. They really get along well, and after everything that's happened with Peridot and the great relationship she has with Steven, and of course we know that Peridot really respects Amethyst as the strongest crystal gem, the one, like the experimental one that was made on Earth. So Peridot loves having Amethyst's approval. So the three of them together is fun, and the fact that they all generally have short forms as their default forms makes them the short squad, and I think that was just a really cute thing to see. These are all just marvelous episodes. Of course, we have the amusement park scenario, and they're not tall enough to ride, and Peridot isn't able to stretch herself like Amethyst and Steven can, and she can't make herself appear tall enough. And the parts in this episode where they're trying to teach Peridot how to shift and how to stretch herself out, they're they're just kind of adorable, or maybe adorable is more the better way to put it. Peridot is always fun, and the way she just kind of keeps saying "ow, ow" with almost no emotion to it as they keep trying to stretch her out was just a really nice little brilliant piece of voice work. Ultimately, this knowledge that Peridot is like a substandard gem, like gems are now being made without the powers that their predecessors had because of a resource situation on Homeworld, and that Peridot is basically just kind of a, for lack of a better word, really bland gem that was made, and she's given other abilities through technology rather than just having them naturally. Technology that she lost in her initial fights with the crystal gems when she was on Earth, and now she is how she is. And then she discovers this whole power with the ability to manipulate metallic objects. This is definitely a new thing for her. I thought it was a little weird for it to just show up, but I'm not really objecting to it because it's nice seeing something new with Peridot. We saw her adjust to life on Earth. We saw her warm up slowly to the crystal gems and decide that she wants to help save the Earth. And then we saw her really become a part of this group after telling off Yellow Diamond and calling her a clod to her face, and the way that she just kind of comes to embrace this new life. You know, she went from hating the Earth to really kind of falling in love with it and being glad that she's there, and she's glad to be a part of the Crystal Gems. I would like to see her with a star, but, you know, maybe we'll get an episode where they'll have almost a little ceremony or something for that down the line. Who knows? Overall, this is really good, and her ability to cope with her new life on Earth kind of contrasts with Lapis, as we've seen from earlier in season 3. And now that she's on Earth and no longer bonded to Jasper, she's still kind of having trouble. Stephen has helped her somewhat, helped her see that there's more to Earth than her immediate surroundings, and he's also eventually able to get the water gem to kind of accept Peridot and at least have kind of a civil and cordial relationship with her. So we'll see where that goes in the long run. Lapis is really kind of an interesting, tragic character, and I'm sure there's plenty more stuff planned with her. but I think that Peridot is by far the best of the newer main characters that they've introduced. In fact, the only real problem I would say is we're not seeing enough of characters like Connie, who, as I recall, hasn't been seen since the last time Steven had a birthday in the middle of season 2. So she really needs to get some FaceTime put in. It is nice to see other side characters like Lars and Sadie, and I'm glad they did the episode The New Lars and made good use of those characters. Sadie is probably one of my absolutely favorite human characters because she's just someone who kind of perseveres. You know, she has kind of a tough life. She's raised by a single mom who's kind of overbearing, and she's more or less kind of hopelessly in love with Lars, who is really not a very good person to her. She feels that deep down Lars is a good person, and he very well may be, but he often does not act that way. And that's one of the things that she's still kind of coping with. And sometimes she really feels like she just wants to walk away from that situation, but it's a hard thing to do. As far as the new Lars goes and Steven discovering this new power, apparently he's now able to basically possess other people, and he tries to make Lars into a better person throughout the day that he is in Lars's body. Mostly succeeding, I would say, based on the way the episode ends. Maybe he at least forces the boy to give a second thought to the people that are around him. So hopefully we'll see that continue. I would definitely like to see more of his and Sadie's characters in season 3 because they are just so rich. I mean, even though Lars is kind of, when you look at him on the surface, he's just kind of this one-dimensional, the jerk with a heart of a jerk, who maybe possibly holds some kind of hides some kind of heart of gold. I think his potential to be more than that, and that we see in certain episodes, is definitely there. And Sadie, there's definitely a lot of things that can be done with her, and she usually does get one or two nice little episodes a season that focus on these little vignettes with her character, and I'm definitely hoping we get some of those as time goes on. That's as far as I've gotten in our season, well, not season 3, but the Summer of Steven in general so far. But I should be getting through another 5 or 6 episodes, and I'll be definitely wanting to discuss them. I don't have a lot to tear down on these. I'm not finding things to complain about. Unlike season 2 of Star vs. the Forces of Evil, Steven Universe really seems to be doing almost everything right at the moment. While I could certainly find some things to nitpick and quibble about, it's just really not worth it. A good show is a good show, and Cartoon Network is really allowing this one to grow. And very much thanks to Rebecca Sugar and her amazing staff, who are staying true to the vision of their series and really giving these characters room to breathe. I certainly hope we get there with Star Versus later this season. I don't know, but I absolutely will continue to review each episode as it comes out. Well, so these were the insights that I had on what's going on at Steven Universe at this point in time. Nothing too groundbreaking here, but again, I want to save criticisms or anything for a time when it might really deserve it. And there's so much out there right now that I don't even want to start speculating on things until there's really more to go on, especially because there's episodes that have been released that I haven't seen. I don't want to start speculating on something that's going to get answered in an episode that I'll see in a day or two. So for now, I'm going to leave it at that. But yeah, this was definitely fun. So thanks for being here to join me. Look for another video this weekend on season 6 of My Little Pony, and episode 3 of season 2 of Star Versus will get reviewed shortly as well. If there's other shows out there I'm not addressing that you'd like me to, you can certainly drop me a line, leave a comment for this video. I'll be more than happy to take the time to do that for you. In the meantime, I continue to be Lord Malachite, and thanks for watching. You guys have yourselves a great time.